I'm very tempted to just say, I'm not going to accept this sentence agreement. We'll go to trial. And if you're convicted of felony murder, you'll go to prison for the rest of your life. That means you'll die there. That's what I'm tempted to do.
At 16, you knew not to keep pounding your fist on that pillow with that little baby's head there. That little boy had to be terrified.
I didn't mean to kill Austin. Ashley, I really didn't.
Face the judge.
I really think I did that. I didn't mean to hurt him.
14-year-old Philip Chism.
He is pure evil, and evil can never be rehabilitated.
You must imprison this killer for the rest of his life.
A 9th grader who's in court for murdering his 24-year-old school math teacher, Colleen Ritzer, on October 22, 2013. Colleen was known for her dedication to her students, and on that fateful day, she had asked Chism to stay after school for additional lessons. Little did she know that her kindness would lead to a horrific end. Chism came prepared with a knife, a change of clothes, and gloves. He followed her into a restroom where he took her life. His brutality didn't stop there. He robbed, assaulted, and abused her. Afterward, he disposed of her lifeless body by placing it in a garbage bin and dragging it behind the school. In a futile attempt to cover up his crimes, Chism went into town and used Ritzard's credit card to buy a movie ticket. However, he was traced down and arrested by the police the next morning. He still had Colleen's blood on his hands. While the magnitude of Chism's crimes is daunting, his courtroom behavior will leave you in disbelief. Philip Chism faced multiple charges, including murder, aggravated rape, and armed robbery. Throughout the court proceedings, Chism displayed a shocking lack of remorse, even as the victim's father read his statement.
The killer knew exactly what he was doing and has never shown remorse.
His demeanor and actions demonstrated a complete disregard for the gravity of his crimes and the immeasurable pain he had inflicted on Colleen Ritzer's family, even in the face of a touching tribute by Colleen's brother.
Put this animal behind bars for the maximum possible sentence. Do not give this coward the opportunity to shatter another family's lives.
Chism remained cold and unrepentant. His attorneys claimed that he was mentally unstable, but that didn't work. In February 2016,
the court will impose the mandatory life sentence for the murder of Colleen Ritzer and set a parole eligibility date of 25 years, the highest level our law allows.
However, while Chism's reaction could certainly be dismissed as an effect of a mental illness, the same can't be said for the case of 19-year-old Brandon Spencer, who allegedly started shooting at a crowded Halloween party on the campus of the University of Southern California in Los Angeles.
I'm sorry for what happened, Your Honor, but I need your life in prison.
4 individuals were injured in the shooting, but fortunately, there were no fatalities.
That if you are so intent on killing someone, that you're willing to shoot them, and at the same time open fire into a crowd.
Following the shooting, Spencer was detained by the Los Angeles Police Department for questioning. A couple of days later, he was charged with 4 counts of attempted murder. The prosecution argued during the trial that the shooting was the result of an ongoing feud between Spencer and a rival gang member, noting that Spencer himself was a documented and well-known gang member.
I'm not a bad person, but I made mistakes. But I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to portray me as.
Despite the horrifying nature of Spencer's offenses, his actions during the trial managed to shock everyone present. Throughout the trial, Spencer maintained his innocence, but the jury disagreed. Spencer also pleaded his case. The judge sentenced Brandon Spencer to 40 years to life in prison for the 4 counts of attempted murder. When Spencer heard his sentence, this was his reaction. However, while Spencer's behavior raised eyebrows, it's nothing compared to the explosive actions of 15-year-old Konrad Schafer during their trial.
This was a 15-year-old who was out semi-automatic rifle shooting up.
Schafer shocked Osceola County when he and his friends began randomly shooting at the residence, resulting in the tragic death of 17-year-old David Guerrero, who was on his way to work. Before the shootings, Schafer had persuaded his father to purchase a .45 caliber high-point carbine and 100 rounds of ammunition. He allegedly took the gun from his house while his father was asleep, marking the beginning of the neighborhood's nightmare. Konrad Schafer and 3 of his friends, David Demis, Victoria Rios, and Juan Muriel terrorized the community for 2 weeks. They even invaded 22-year-old Eric Roupnarin's home and fatally shot him. During his trial, Schafer had this to say to the families of the victims.
15 at a time, I'm really sorry for the things I've done. And I know I did wrong, and I know my apology don't mean nothing to you. And I know it ain't gonna change how you feel about me.
Families of Eric Roupnarin also seem to agree.
Eric was my grandson. He was my helper to me and my wife. At this time, my family and I had no intention to forgive the guilty because of such a heinous and brutal crime that was done to my grandson, Eric Roupnarin.
Schafer eventually pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder, with over 22 incidents of gunfire damaging homes and vehicles. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences, with the judge stating that if Schafer had been just 3 years older, he would have received the death penalty. However, Konrad Schafer isn't alone in their courtroom actions. Let's not forget the infamous incident involving 15-year-old Martice Fuller, who's facing charges including murder in Kenosha County, Wisconsin.
I stopped in my doorway and I looked at him and I said, "Oh my God, Martice." I said, "Please, you don't have to do this." And he looked at me and he said, "Yes, I do."
Fuller broke into his ex-girlfriend's house with a handgun and fatally shot his ex-girlfriend in her bedroom while she was listening to music. Her mother, who rushed to the scene upon hearing the gunshots, confronted the assailant and was shot twice, but survived. During the trial, he showed little emotion. Fuller pleaded not guilty, but the jury ultimately found him guilty on 3 counts.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
At his sentencing, Fuller, perhaps for the first time in the courtroom, displayed some emotion. However, he continued to assert his innocence and delivered a statement through his attorney expressing his apologies to the family.
Mr. Fuller's prepared a statement that he asked that I read on his behalf. Martice writes, "Wholeheartedly, I wanted to write this giving my sincerest apologies to this family I once shared time and love with. Truthfully, I am sorry about the pain you've all suffered through this, but more importantly, the loss of my ex-girlfriend Kaylee that I loved too. So I am sorry. Despite the hatred that is against me, I still am sorry. But I have to continue to stand innocent because I am. And I know that I've barely showed emotion throughout my time, but in all honesty, it is because it's hard to have tears left to cry knowing my mom lost a son, one of her children too. But I am sorry, and I hope you all can eventually see in your hearts and vision that I am not the person the media has made me out to be."
The judge, however, wasn't convinced that Fuller could do better in the future.
You are a very dangerous and a damaged human being. So in the interest of protecting the public, acknowledging the seriousness of these acts, the court orders that on count 1, you are sentenced to life in prison without eligibility for extended supervision.
Despite the gravity of his sentence, Fuller appeared largely unaffected. However, as we saw Fuller's unconcern with his sentence, it brings to mind the strikingly similar response of Jennifer Mee.
When I walked up, I was to the corner. I heard the first gunshot. After the first gunshot, I ran.
At 15, Jennifer Mee became popular as the Hiccup Girl due to her sudden bout of uncontrollable hiccups. She even appeared on shows and events. Eventually, she was cured, and her popularity ended. But Jennifer wasn't satisfied. She needed the fame, so she and her boyfriend, Lamont Newton, and another friend, Lauren Rayford, set up a robbery with victims she had met online. The trio lured a 22-year-old man to a vacant home where they robbed and fatally shot him, taking $50 as the reward. As if Jennifer's offenses weren't enough, her demeanor in court will leave you dumbfounded. At 19 years old, she was arrested on charges of first-degree murder. During her trial, this recorded call she made to her mother while in detention was played for the jury.
Hello? Hi, Mama. Hello, Jennifer. What's going on? I'm in jail. Why are you in jail? From murder in the first degree. Who'd you kill? I didn't kill nobody. It all went wrong, Mama. Who are you trying to kill, Jennifer? Nobody. It wasn't even supposed to happen like that, Mom.
Jennifer was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jennifer's co-defendants, Rayford and Newton, were also sentenced to life imprisonment for their roles in the murder. However, when emotions run high in court, the actions of Jennifer Mee and Alyssa Bustamante leave us questioning sanity itself.
Was her throat cut? And Alyssa said yes. And that's when the grandmother broke down and began crying.
Alyssa Bustamante was a troubled 15-year-old girl who lived with her grandparents and siblings in St. Martins, Missouri. On October 21, 2009, Bustamante lured her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Olton, into the woods behind her house. She strangled, stabbed, and slit the throat of the innocent girl, then buried her in a pre-dug grave.
I just wonder what it would be like just to kill someone. See the life just drain out of someone, I wonder.
She then went to a church dance as if nothing had happened. If you thought Bustamante's crimes were reprehensible, brace yourself for her shocking conduct during the proceedings. The police found Olton's body 2 days later after Bustamante confessed to the murder. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. She pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree murder in exchange for avoiding a trial and a possible life sentence without parole. At her sentencing hearing, Bustamante apologized to Olson's family and said she regretted her actions. However, the judge was not moved by her remorse and sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. She will be eligible for release in 2054 when she will be 60 years old. However, let's compare the jaw-dropping reaction of Bustamante to the astonishing behavior of 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz.
My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. My goal is at least 20 people with an AR-15 and a couple tracer rounds.
A gunman who carried out the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history. Cruz killed 17 people and wounded 17 others at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, on February 14, 2018.
Oh my God!
He used a semi-automatic rifle that he had legally purchased a year earlier.
I came out and asked him, "What are you going to do with the rifle?" And the reply was, "I go shooting with my friends on the weekends. I just want my own stuff."
Despite the horrifying nature of Cruz's offenses, his actions during sentencing managed to shock everyone present. Cruz was arrested and charged with 17 counts of premeditated first-degree murder and 17 counts of attempted first-degree murder. He pleaded guilty to all the charges, admitting his responsibility for the massacre.
What's going on today, bro?
The demons, man.
Demons?
Voices.
Voices and demons?
Where's the voices? Where the f*** am I? Holy shit. What happened?
Shut up.
The jury could not reach a unanimous verdict on whether to recommend the death penalty for Cruz. As a result, he was automatically sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for each of the 17 murders, as required by Florida law. He was also sentenced to an additional 34 life sentences for the attempted murders. At his sentencing, Cruz attempted an apology.
I am very sorry for what I did, and I have to live with it every day. And that if I were to get a second chance, I will do everything in my power to try to help others. And I am doing this for you, and I do not care if you do not believe me. And I love you, and I know you don't believe me, but I have to live with this every day.
Cruz showed no remorse or empathy for his actions and instead wore a red prison jumpsuit, glasses, and a mask. He even laughed at one point during the proceedings. Cruz's lack of emotion and his escape from the death penalty outraged and disappointed many of the victims' relatives who had hoped for a different outcome. However, while it was clear that Cruz didn't care about the years he was going to spend in jail, his behavior in court was very different to that of 19-year-old Ky'andrea Cook, a high school student who used a dating app to set up a robbery scheme with her boyfriend, Kendrick Bass. Cook lured Perry Nida, a Palm Coast man, to a secluded spot in South Daytona, where Bass and others attacked him and his friend, Emmanuel Purcell, who had accompanied him. Bass shot Purcell in the chest, but luckily he survived. However, what Cook did in the courtroom was even crazier. Cook was arrested and charged with principal to carjacking with a deadly weapon and principal to aggravated battery with a deadly weapon.
Guilty of all three charges, sentence you to 20 years in state prison.
Cook was later allowed to withdraw her plea and cooperate with the state to testify against Bass, who was also charged with attempted murder. She entered a new plea deal and received a reduced sentence of 11 years in prison and 20 years of probation.
I think you got good in you, and I think you got potential. Don't lose sight of that.
She apologized to the victims and their families.
I just want to say that I'm sorry that it went wrong, that I presented Keisha, that I didn't even know you Keisha. My boyfriend and his friends get me to do this.
However, this wasn't the only time a convict freaked out during their sentencing. Take, for example, the case of 18-year-old Danta Wright, a teenager who was involved in the murder of Jordan Klee, a high school student and athlete in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Wright and 2 other youths planned to rob Klee of his drugs, clothes, and shoes, but Klee fought back. Wright then shot him in the back of the head, killing him instantly. Just when you thought Wright couldn't sink any lower, his behavior in the courtroom will leave you stunned. Wright was arrested and charged with felony murder, armed robbery, conspiracy to commit armed robbery, and felony firearm possession. The family of the victim read a very emotional victim impact statement. But this is how serious Wright felt about their pain.
Sincerely hope that whatever it was you wanted so badly that you felt the need to murder my son was worth the next at least 52 years of your continued existence. You won't get the luxury of raising your child because you took mine away.
When he was called to address the court, Wright shocked everyone.
I want to tell y'all, I'll be home soon, or I'll be Keon. I love my family. That's all you got to say.
Wright showed no remorse or empathy for his actions. His attitude in court shocked and angered the judge and the victim's family. The judge reserved some choice words for him.
I'm very tempted to just say, I'm not going to accept this sentence agreement. We'll go to trial, and if you're convicted of felony murder, you'll go to prison for the rest of your life. That means you'll die there. That's what I'm tempted to do.
Wright was eventually sentenced to 25 to 52 years in prison for his role in the murder.
She told me to hit her. I didn't want to, but I want him hitting me, so I hit her.
It's nothing compared to the explosive actions of 13-year-old Antoino Barbeau and 14-year-old Nathan Paape during their trial.
She said that she's going to have to call Antonio's mom, and Antonio kept looking at me, and then he hit her in the head.
In September 2012, Antonio and Nathan conspired to and brutally murdered Antonio's great-grandmother, 76-year-old Barbara Olson. The kids bludgeoned her to death using a hammer and a hatchet, then stole her purse. What's even more chilling is that after committing this heinous crime, they used part of the stolen money to buy marijuana and pizza.
We were going to try to scare her to get money and then use force if needed.
When you say use force if needed, was there a discussion about what type of force you might use?
An attack, I guess to kill.
During the legal proceedings, Antonio Barbeau changed his plea from not guilty by reason of mental illness or defect to no contest, reaching an agreement with the prosecution. However, he was very remorseful.
I know I don't show my emotions much, and I myself am not sure why, but that doesn't mean I don't.
Nathan Paape also had some things to let off his chest.
I just want to say that I'm truly sorry for everything that happened.
However, despite his plea and expressions of remorse, he and Nathan were sentenced to life imprisonment. They were both remorseful as they left the court. However, just when you thought you'd seen it all, another convict surpasses Antonio and Nathan's wild courtroom display.
As I approached, I got closer. I saw her really sniffing at a particular area. So I pulled her back, and when I looked, kind of second-guessed myself. I thought I saw a dead body, but I wasn't too sure because, was missing some limbs.
Enter 18-year-old Mathew Borges, who was facing a murder charge for the beheading of 16-year-old Lee Valoria Paulino in December 2016. Borges and Paulino were students at Lawrence High School and had reportedly smoked marijuana together in November 2016, which was the last time Paulino was seen alive. Paulino's body was discovered by a dog walker near the Merrimack River 2 weeks after he went missing. The details of the scene were chilling. Listen as the dog walker explained what he saw.
As I approached, I got closer. I saw her really sniffing at a particular area. So I pulled her back, and when I looked, kind of second-guessed myself. I thought I saw a dead body, but I wasn't too sure because, was missing some limbs.
At first, Borges was not considered a suspect, but the tide of evidence began pointing unmistakably in his direction. During the trial, the prosecutor, Jay Gabito, argued that there was an overwhelming amount of evidence incriminating Borges. The allegations against Borges were disturbing. It was suggested that he had stabbed Paulino multiple times before decapitating him. When the verdict was delivered, Borges displayed an eerie lack of emotion.
That the defendant, Mathew Borges, is guilty on the charge of first-degree murder.
Eventually, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole only after serving 30 years. However shocking Borges' reaction to his sentence was, how does it compare to the reaction of 16-year-old Dylan Schumaker, who was in Buffalo, New York courthouse?
I am a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry in front of the jury, and they're going to feel sorry for me.
On charges of second-degree murder. In March 2013, Schumaker was babysitting his 18-year-old girlfriend's child while she went to work. He was inside a Springvale home shared with his parents. Tragically, that evening, Schumaker beat the 23-month-old Austin to death. Following this horrifying incident, Schumaker was arrested and charged with the murder of the toddler, along with child abuse charges. Schumaker claimed he didn't intend to harm the child or cause his death, stating that he was trying to get the child to stop crying.
At 16, you knew not to keep pounding your fist on that pillow with that little baby's head there. That little boy had to be terrified. Probably he had a hard time breathing. And then you repeatedly punched him so hard as to cause his death by bleeding on the brain.
If you thought Schumaker would be remorseful for his crimes, you're wrong. As Schumaker entered the courtroom for his sentencing, he couldn't even get settled behind the defense table before breaking into tears. That's right, Schumaker expressed how sorry he was for his actions.
I take back what was done. I wish I could. I would give my life for Austin.
However, it was all an act, and the judge wasn't fooled. The judge pointed out a recorded phone call between Schumaker and his mother.
The record will show that you admitted that on July 23, 2013, in a phone call to your mother from the holding center, you stated, and I got a quote from the court reporter, I am a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry in front of the jury, and they're going to feel sorry for me.
Despite his second attempt at an apology, Schumaker was handed the maximum punishment of 25 years to life in prison. However, this sentence was later modified to 18 years to life. However, while some may attribute Schumaker's reaction to juvenile delinquency, this is 18-year-old Seandell Jackson, who's facing charges of murder in the Milwaukee County Courthouse. Jackson and his friend were out to rob when they crossed paths with 21-year-old Nathan Potter, a University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee college student, heading to his apartment. The friends approached Potter demanding money, but Potter was only a student and had no money. When Jackson realized Potter had no cash to offer, he shot him, killing him. After the murder, Jackson fled to Mississippi, but was ultimately arrested, thanks to a tip from his uncle.
I don't have enough time to think about a whole lot of things now, because you just can't take nobody's life. You know, that's just wrong.
As if killing someone at 18 was not outrageous enough, Jackson's actions in court were even more dramatic. During his trial, Jackson's actions in the courtroom drew attention. Here, Jackson is gesturing towards the victim's family, totally unremorseful about his actions. Jackson was quickly escorted out of the courtroom, but as he was leaving, Jackson flashed a disturbing smile toward the grieving family. Now, at his sentencing, Jackson's mother had an opportunity to address the court.
When I saw it on the news, I even cried. I'm like, oh my God, I can't imagine what that mother is going through. I never had a clue that my child had anything to do with it. My son is not a monster. He is not a monster.
When Jackson was given the opportunity to speak, Jackson surprised everyone.
I apologize for my behaviors. Please don't take my life from me.
That's right. In a last-ditch attempt to save himself, Jackson pleaded for leniency and offered an apology for his actions. Now it is time for the judge to deliver his sentence.
The need to protect the community, which I also fear for with Mr. Jackson, and I am going to sentence Mr. Jackson to life imprisonment without possibility for extended supervision. I know that that is something that is reserved for the most serious of cases, and
Jackson was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. But when Jackson heard that he would be spending the rest of his life in prison, he couldn't contain his emotions. Deputies had to intervene, restraining Jackson as his anger flared. Watch again as Jackson pushed this cop over. Fortunately, this cop was able to wrestle him to the ground, while this officer here unbuckled his pepper spray and put it to work. Amidst the chaos, a member of Jackson's family has a shocking remark for the Potter family. Eventually, Jackson was let out of the court to spend the rest of his life behind bars. But Nathan Potter's parents had a few things to say.
Our little girl was afraid. She was afraid that he was going to try and kill one of us.
I hope that as he spends the rest of his life in jail.
Jackson's friend and accomplice pleaded guilty to acting as the lookout in the crime and received a 12-year sentence. Despite the terrible behavior of Seandell's family in court, the uncle who tipped off the police maintained his stance despite threats. However, this wasn't the only time a convicted kid freaked out during his sentencing.
Your son is the victim and the killer is your granddaughter. Can you talk about that?
She's not my granddaughter.
Take, for example, the case of 16-year-old Sierra Halseth and 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero.
Where did the evil come that was bred into a soul that murders their own father?
Who are facing multiple charges, including murder with a deadly weapon, arson, robbery with a deadly weapon, conspiracy to conduct robbery, and multiple counts of fraudulent use of credit or debit cards at the Regional Justice Center in Las Vegas. The teenage couple murdered Sierra's father, 45-year-old Daniel Halseth. They stabbed him over 60 times and attempted to burn his body and house. Then, they took his debit card and fled to Salt Lake City, indulged themselves, and opened a YouTube channel where they callously shared information like this.
Day 3 after murdering somebody.
Whoa! Don't put that on camera.
The teenagers dated in 2020, but their parents did not approve of the relationship, forcing them to end it. On April 9th, 2021, Daniel's lifeless body was discovered in the garage of his Las Vegas home. The teenagers were subsequently apprehended in Salt Lake City. Throughout the court proceedings, the behavior of Sierra was starkly different from that of Aaron. Aaron Guerrero seems to be emotionally breaking down. When he was allowed to speak, he had this to say.
I ask for forgiveness as I get sentenced today, and I hope it brings you a little peace.
Meanwhile, Sierra Halseth appeared disinterested, bored, and detached from the gravity of the situation. She claimed that her father had physically and sexually abused her.
He locks me in place and starts pushing me and hitting me around.
Eventually, they were both found guilty by District Judge Chiara Jones.
55 days credit for time served. That is a total aggregate sentence of life in the Nevada Department of Corrections with the possibility of parole up to 22 years of good service.
And ordered to pay $5,000 in restitution. For Sierra's grandmother, a lot has changed.
You're in a tough spot because your son is the victim and the killer is your granddaughter. Can you talk about that?
If you thought these reactions were shocking, you'd be amazed at this video, the top 5 biggest judge explosions of all time.